Great. So hello everyone there on Facebook. I'm never quite sure if we're live or not live, but I believe that we are, so that's all good. Wanted to say hi. We're a little late starting because we just really wanted to honour the hashtag for kneeling at the moment. There's a lot going on in the world, which seems like a perfect time for me to be introducing you to three extraordinary women, friends of mine, personal friends of mine in my own life. I mean, why would you want to talk to someone who wasn't your friend unless they were famous or really rich? And then you might want to talk to them. Or good looking. That's another good reason to talk to people, especially strangers. But no hugging, no hugging. Keep social distancing rules. We've got a lot going on in the world, and we were thinking, we've already done one of these Facebook Lives around the subject of emotional resilience. We're looking at this one from the subject of power, which seems to be a real what's the best way of putting it? Hot topic, interesting thing that's kind of going on at the moment. We were thinking of creating some kind of co-directors network for the world that we want to create off the back of COVID-19. So we wanted to pull together some expert thinkers, some people who can help you step in. Well, I say help you, that's really patronising, I do apologise. That can get your juices flowing, get your ideas moving about how people who have real big hearts and yet small voices can find ways in which to step up those small voices and become an amazing ambassador in the world for change in whatever walk of life. I don't care whether or not you're working at Sainsbury's. I don't care whether or not other supermarkets are available. I don't care what it is that you're doing in the world, but now is the time, really. It feels like such an important and integral time to rise up to be the change that you really want to see in the world. And gosh, aren't we seeing that this week? So on the panel, we have the lovely Heena, who is going to be hi Heena, wave Heena. Sorry, it's like Celebrity Squares, isn't it? There's a game show where they used to kind of go onto each person they'd wave. Anyway, sorry, I'm losing myself. That was probably in the 80s. So Heena's going to be fielding your questions. If you've got questions, please post them onto Facebook underneath here, and we will get around to your questions. So if you've got comments or want to join in the conversation, do that as well. And then moving that way, well, I'm moving that way, you're probably moving in anyway. Then we've got Ashely, who is a yoga teacher and spiritual, wonderful person who I have known for years and years and years. She's incredible. And then there's Emma, who also is a yoga teacher who has a company called Do Yoga, and she's my neighbour. She lives around the corner, which is really quite cool. So, yeah. So that's really good. So we're just going to open up to a conversation. Unless you've got any questions or comments, feel free to interrupt us, because we're going to be talking about some stuff, and that's going to be that, really. Great. So thanks so much for having you here, everybody. So before we kind of like went live, we were having a little bit of a chat, really, about how we feel at this particular time with what's been going on. We're trying not to be too political. We're sort of like talking about the sort of the politics of where we are at the moment. And then it also seems like exactly the right time to be talking about politics and becoming political. But we don't want to get down that rabbit hole of things feeling really kind of like dark and moody. So Heena, do you want to speak a little bit about that, because you were the person who was kind of leading the zeitgeist on the empath that you are?
Yeah, so I was talking to these lovely ladies earlier about the fact that I was feeling quite overwhelmed with the news, and whether it's on the news, whether it's on social media, there's so much doom and gloom, and you need to tap into the news. You need to know what's going on in the world. Yet, in order to catch the snippet of the instruction, you come through so much more that it barrages you with so much fear, potentially, but also, I guess, a feeling of needing to get involved, needing to do something, needing to act. I found myself trying to make a cup of tea and feeling overwhelmed with what I might have just caught on the news behind me, and then not being able to function for the day. And so one of the conversations we were having with the lovely ladies earlier was, it'd be really great to just be able to tune out of that, and but still be able to hear the snippets of what you do need. But at the same time, my heart does go out to those that need our attention and our love right now. So it's how do you find that balance? How do you tune in without tuning out? That's probably a great question for the panel, actually.
That is a really good question. So chucking that to Ashely, how do you do that?
Well, shall I answer that one?
Yeah, go for it. Ashly's disappeared.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel for you, Heena, and all empaths at this time, because there's so much in the air. There's so much pain and suffering across the globe, and it's just the weirdest of weird times. So and I really like the way you put it. How do we tune in without tuning out? Because you want to be there for people and to share your love and light to help things get better without being overwhelmed yourself, which takes us back to those emotional resilience tips that you so brilliantly put across last time we were doing this. I mean, for me, I always find like a little bit of shielding helps, a little bit of self-protection, and just being able to kind of almost have a semi-permeable filter, so you're able to transmit the love and light that the world might need without letting the darkness and the nastiness coming in to overwhelm and damage you. So in my meditations, I try and sort of create a kind of shield around me so that I can express and absorb the good stuff, observe the bad stuff, but without letting it touch me too deeply, so that I'm not, like you say, unable to function. Because if you thought about it too much, you wouldn't be. I don't know what the others think. What about you, Ashely? How do you do it?
So my policy throughout the start of this time of Corona and the pandemic has been to really just listen to the instruction of what I can and can't do, and abide by that to a degree that feels sensible and protective for myself and everybody that I might come into contact with. But I've really I've relied on my friends mostly for the bits of information that I've needed to respond to, because there were a few days, especially in the beginning, where I would get caught up in statistics and how many people are dying today and how many new cases there are today. And whilst I feel it's important to bear witness to that stuff to a degree, I think that in my mind, this period that we're going through is an immense opportunity for us to change the structure a little bit of how we've been living. And one of the things that really struck me at the very beginning was there was an awful lot of generosity towards people who had a lot less. So I've made it my mission to just try to keep focusing there and use and be of service where I can. And I live in central London, and it's this whole situation has put us into a forced sense of generosity. Right, we have to be a lot more generous with each other on the street, and there's a pervasive kindness that I'm experiencing. So what's happening is happening, and I want to be informed enough that I can bear witness to it, but also be ignorant enough that I can continue to live my life and try and just offer a bit of light and peace wherever I can, rather than walking around in my own quagmire of holy shit, what's going on.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you should say that about those points of kindness and those connections that you feel. And one of the things that I noticed was, we all know that there's a lot of fake news, that things are sensationalized and put out in particular ways to, what used to be to really just sell newspapers, but now it's kind of, there isn't even necessarily a particular political narrative bias some of the time. It's just simply the fact that we get dopamine hits from when we're seeing things that we need to survive. So we look at these things and go, oh, I need to survive, and then our brain will kind of like come up with the worst case scenario. So one of the things that my mum taught me, which was a very useful thing, whenever we moved into a new house, she'd say, always look at how you would get out if there was a fire. Now, I've probably done that in every single building I've ever been in. I always know where the emergency exits are. And it's not always the door that you came in on. But there's something that is really important to listen to in this world of bias and fake news and all of these things that happen. and your inner knowing, like you do know. I mean, I wrote a book called You Do Know, but you really do know. And my intuition has been really sharpened by not being around people so much. You know, maybe it's because, like, you know, we talked before about being an empath. When you walk around in the world kind of like with a gaping open heart, where you're constantly picking up information from people, and because you're an empath, so you're always looking for where you can give service or where you can give help. I mean, for both of you as yoga teachers, must really relate to Heena on this, because I imagine that, you know, part of your job must be about being able to feel the people who are in your yoga class. And I found that my intuition is like razor sharp. Like when I've got clients, it's like poof, bang on, whereas before might take a couple of minutes or something to tune into where they're at. And now it's like, you know, they almost don't even have to speak. I could kind of like just wax lyrical and let me tell you what's wrong with you. It's like, you know, I've always heard people like they're making sound. And you can do this, you know, when something, we say that something's out of tune or somebody's out of whack. You know, you can do this around people, but you can do this when you're looking at social media. You can do this when you're kind of like going, there's an agenda here, there's a point here, there's a focus here, there's something that's being clouded in bullshit in order to make you think a particular thing. So your inner guidance is your best and wisest advisor. And when I've been walking around or going for a run, that sense of, you know, especially shopping's a thing, isn't it? But when you go shopping and there's this sense of like, oh, who's going to cough on me and kill me? I just get this real sense of the people who are scared that I need to give way more than 2 meters distance to. And then the people who are just like, oh, it's nice to be out, isn't it? Oh, are you going to get that eclair? Yeah, I might buy an eclair. You know, just the feeling of kind of the joke that you can have about, oh, careful. You know, it's like sometimes I feel like my whole body is now a car. Like instead of kind of like seeing myself as being this, I'm seeing myself as being so much bigger and having to give room in the same way that I would when I've got looking at the passenger side of the car when overtaking other cars. That spatial awareness, and just knowing who needs a little bit more of that than who doesn't. So yeah, it's an interesting time to go on an inward journey and really engage with your intuition, I feel.
And that's really valuable, isn't it? Because I think one of the things we talked about earlier was that I'd actually disconnected from the news for several years. I would literally only tune in to know what's going on for a brief moment and then switch off. But suddenly you're needing to watch it more frequently. So now it's, if I was feeling the way I felt, it's certain people, as you say, Becky, would be feeling a heightened experience of that fear, and others that are probably used to it because they've been watching the news or hearing the stories for so many years. They're almost just blinded by it, and they walk around in that daze of, you know, it is just the way the world is. And so I think it's being, I guess, sensitive to the people around us, isn't it?
Well, psychologists call it a state of ambivalence. So we get to a point of a state of ambivalence where you see so many things. You know, we're very indoctrinated by looking at, you know, films that are violent or things like that, or things that are bad on the news. You get to a point of a state of ambivalence. I'm not feeling a lot of ambivalence at the moment. I'm feeling people really are not being ambivalent in the way that they used to be. Are suddenly kind of, maybe it's because we've had everything turned off for 3 months. Then the uprising that's taking place in America, that's being echoed in the UK and around the world, I think suddenly it's almost like people in those 3 months have just become more personally vulnerable, which has allowed them to feel more empathy towards others. What do you guys think about that? I hadn't known I had that thought until I said it. so anything you can say about it might be quite helpful.
Did you point to me? I can't.
Whoever, I don't know which side. I don't know. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I missed the last bit. Can you just say that again?
No, probably not. I can't remember what it was. No, because it just kind of came out of my head. You know how something kind of like comes out. I think I was saying that that the fact that we've been in lockdown and the fact that we have had to go on so let me actually quantify it a bit better. Yeah. The fact that we've been on lockdown, the fact that a lot of us have gone on an inner journey, the fact that a lot of us have suddenly felt vulnerable because we usually feel invincible, and then suddenly, no matter who you are, you can be affected by this. you suddenly reassess everything. Like time has had a different quality. It makes you suddenly reassess everything that you believe to be true. Like when we looked at the environmental crisis, we said things like, well, you'll never get people out of their cars, you'll never get planes out of the sky, you'll never get, and suddenly all of you will never get, this will never change. Like we all believe that there will always be clean running water in our taps. How do we know? How do we know that? We all believe certain things. We have conditionings that tell us who we are and tell us the way that the world is. And that is the map that we navigate our world by. Now, someone came along and spilled a massive mug of coffee on our map, on our life map, and said, actually, nature wins, you know, or give any number of conspiracy theories about the fact that it was a laboratory or whatever. You know, suddenly we're in positions where we can't guarantee jack shit. And we realised that we never could. And we realised that control was a bit of an illusion. And suddenly that level of vulnerability that has made you question, that has carved out, you know, a question mark in your soul, suddenly opens the doorway for really being able to see other people's predicaments for the first time. So the community outreach, where, you know, Facebook groups suddenly became community interest companies, like almost overnight, faster than councils could move, like extraordinary work being done. Suddenly we opened up in another way. And I wonder now if, when we're discussing, you know, anything from Black Lives Matter to the domestic violence increase that has been going along, we're not sitting in our, oh, I'm all right, me, little boat anymore. We're suddenly awake in a way that we weren't before to our own vulnerabilities, which allows us to have more empathy for other people's vulnerabilities. And maybe this is the time where those voices can actually be heard by open ears. So that's what I was rabbiting on about.
I like the way that you wrapped it up there. I think that also it's helped us to realize our collective power as individuals when we come together for a greater good. I'm seeing a lot of startups and charities and incredibly creative ventures opening up in London to feed people, to support people, to help people, to call people. And I think people are realizing that we have to do this for ourselves now. This is our time to step into our power in whatever teeny tiny form that we can. Let's just give it our all. And that's my position anyway. Let's just remain autonomous and do what I can from this seat here with my personal connections. And in a way, this is part of that, isn't it? Where we've come together because of this to hopefully offer something of value and comfort and balm to somebody.
Totally. I mean, I've lived in London, and it used to be that you get a free copy of the Metro as you were getting onto the tube in the days before mobile phones, so you could bury your head in it just in case a pregnant woman wanted a seat. You know, not personally, I'm so generous, but yeah, people didn't want to talk to anybody. Like it's like the whole of London, all of these people, and everyone's kind of like going, get off my carriage. But suddenly that has really changed. Yeah, so it's a massive difference. What have you witnessed, Emma?
Well, I think there is an upwelling of kindness. I do agree, and I can't remember where this quote is from, but in any natural disaster, somebody was saying, always look for the helpers, or always look for the helpers. You know, if there's an earthquake, there'll be somebody dragging somebody out the rubble with no thought for themselves. If there's a terrible refugee crisis, there'll be the Doctors Without Borders will be in there giving their all, and it is actually so uplifting to see what people do for other people for little or no reward when things go wrong, and yeah, that does give me hope, and they should be celebrated, the kind hearts. And just on a local level, you know, the donations to the food banks, and yeah, the neighborhood groups have been set up, and the checking in on each other more than you would have done. Just personally, I've got to know my own neighbours really well because we're just talking more, which I hope. So it's really changed the atmosphere in our street.
Me too. And who knew they drink as much as I do? Amazing.
It's created a real sense of community, hasn't it? It's gone from corporations to communities, and there's a really fabulous comment made here on our chat from lovely Anne. She says, I think it's definitely a huge time for change. This is why a social support network like this is so important. Together we can change the world while supporting each other. And I think it really is that strength of feeling of being a part of something. And I think there was a study, I'm sure one of you can help me out, there was a study recently where they looked into why certain people were able to live longer and what were those key elements of a good life. And obviously there was the great things like a good routine and good healthy diet, but in amongst that was also being a part of a community, and here we are creating that. So that's fabulous. There's also somebody here, lovely lady Claire, who's also said please do share the meditation links that I think Ashely you mentioned earlier, so I'm sure we can do that later on at the end of this. So there you go.
We shall source those. That's really good, and that
I
makes
have
more.
I do have one here as well. I have a question that says, would love to get your views on what next. How do we ensure this community cohesion and spirit goes on after the emergency situation? It's a question being asked by many.
Yeah, it's a huge question. That the what next. Personally, I think that starts with your own awareness of your own inner power. I think that we've always had a fear of the type of power that we all don't like, which is that power over. When we think about, it might be the teacher when you're growing up, or anyone who has kind of like power over you. One of the things that causes the most amount of stress in any single human being is having your power taken away from you, whether or not you think it's a minuscule thing, like someone moving an object on your desk at work, as a little power dynamic maneuver. But we have a real fear of having our power taken away. So if you ever think about anything that makes you fuming angry, if you dig into it, the chances are it's going to have something to do with having your power taken away. And this is important because when we're looking at what we want in the new world, but when we're looking at what do we want off the back of this in order to keep these community groups going and all of these different things, my key to this would be to not give your power away, is to seek out your inner power, to really become really clear on what your inner power is. Because we have a real fear of people with power over. We don't want to be like those people because we tend to have a word that starts with W and rhymes with anchor for those people. But we desperately want to give power to. But you can't give power to unless you own your own power. So we wander around banding these words about empowerment. My grandmother never used the word empowerment. This has been a really new thing. We are in the age of power. And so we talk about empowerment, and then if somebody said, would you like a little bit more power? No, not me, I'm too weak and humble. No, I couldn't possibly have any more power, but thanks for asking. No, it's about time to actually step up and say, actually I do have a voice and I do have an opinion, I do have something to say, and I'm not going to step into W anchor power. I'm going to come from a place where if I'm empowered, I have the power to empower other people. And in a sense, if you look at the leaders of these community groups, it's probably, we started because we couldn't, you can't call someone who's volunteering for the community a W anchor, can you? You can't, you just can't, because they're doing good in the world. And that gave us the empowerment to step up. So if we want to move forward into community governance, once this is all over, we can't have that as an excuse to hide behind. It literally has to be because my own inner power says I cannot stand by and not be part of the change. So I cannot stand by and allow my ideas to be thwarted by somebody who is on a psychopathic spectrum. Just saying, W anchor. Stop talking there.
So are you just to summarize, you're saying like to empower others, you need to be fully in your own power? Is that
not fully, even 50%, we don't expect it to be the Duracell bunny, but it's this Spiritual people for years have been really afraid of their ego. They say, oh, I don't want an ego. And what's really remarkable is our desire to diminish our ego comes from the ego, because the want of anything like that actually comes from there. It's not your soul saying, you know, oh, you need to get rid of your ego. It doesn't come from that place. It comes from the fact that we want to live pain-free lives. So the ego says, seek destroying your ego. Ashely so needs to speak on this. You know, so seek destroying your ego, but whatever you do, don't actually do that, because the ego keeps the physical body alive. It says me first. So we want to get rid of our ego. We don't want egoic power. Then we don't step into real, authentic inner power. We don't step into grace. We don't step into our kindness, because unless you own your own power, unless you own self-love, then you will always become depleted in whatever you do for anybody else. You will always feel depleted, and then that depletion ends up feeling resentful, and then you think, well, actually, if I empower other people, it usually lessens me in some way. And that's simply not true, but it does feel like that. So it's a case of embracing and stepping into who you are authentically, and saying, I've got skills, I've got talents, I've got stuff, and I'm going to use these skills and talents for the greater good of all. And if you can't admit that you've got skills and talents, and you just want to be recognised, you're never going to be seen that way. You have to step up. Actually, I'm going to shut up because I know that you're going to have stuff to say on that.
Well, I'm probably going to strip it back to a bit of simplicity I experienced in the week, because, you know, like, I think one great lesson one of my teachers taught me was, you know, if you have something, give it away. And in the giving of it, you realize that you have it, right? So if I give you something, then may I give it freely, whether, you know, coming from a place of authenticity and being in my strength, because when I'm in the flow of my soul, I suppose, I'm invulnerable. Even if you say something kind of mean and snarky to me, it doesn't really touch me. It's like water off a duck's back, because I'm so rooted in me that it's okay that you might be having a moment and reach out with something snarky. But to bring it back to some kind of, you know, there are many ways we can be powerful in this world and be rooted in our talents and in our gifts and our desire to share those. But I'll share with you a story that happened to me just the other day. I was having a really funny day, you know, being of female persuasion and the hormonal flows that we go through, etc. It was probably heightened and I was a bit on the edge. Anyway, I went to get a cup of coffee, and oh, that's all right. But the girl received me and served me with such grace, with such inner light and inner strength. There was a real transmission of energy there. She didn't need to be a great spiritual teacher, though she was and is in that moment, absolutely. There was something so pure about her offering that I was so incredibly touched by it and uplifted by it, that I think it really served as a reminder of the simplest acts of kindness and of giving of ourselves with much generosity, as she did to me in those moments, and probably has no idea that she did that, but are really an empowered state and place to be. Now, she just looked like she was having a great day. She was full of light, full of joy, and I was not. But she uplifted me a bit, and it was a real gift. And I think that's one way that we can have a power exchange as well. Just like, hey, I see you when I'm here.
Well, do you know, speaking about kindness as well, Ashely, there's a comment here from Manisha. She says, I think it's really important to use this situation to help children understand about kindness, because they're the future. I went back to work at school this week, and the children showed how much they missed school friends. If we can show young children how to help the community share kindness and talk out on how they're feeling and about their well-being, this world would be a better place as they grow up into adults. Really valid comment. And I have a question here for you as well. When talking about power and shifts in power, this may be a time for a shift in power in our government and legal system. That, in my opinion, is very out of alignment and balance with the greater good, and where the system takes power away from people. What are your thoughts on this? Now, here's the one that was trying to avoid those debates, but I'm throwing you in with it. Come on, ladies, give me your best.
Emma, do you want to go first?
You can go first. I'm talking a lot.
Give it to Emma's space.
Yeah. Oh, well, we were, Heena didn't want us to get too political this evening, but my comment was, well, we live in very politicized times, and so it's impossible not to be political, really. Yeah, I think everyone's has been politicized by what's been happening lately, and wants to talk about it because it's just the weirdest of times in many ways. So yeah, thank you for your question. It's a good question, and it just flags it up. And I think it kind of ties into what Becky's saying as well, because politics is power. It is, by definition, the transmission of power. When you vote, you give away your power to somebody else to act on your behalf. And I think a lot of people are fed up with that, because the people that they've delegated to aren't representing us in the way that we want to be represented. So there is almost like a collective scream going, give me back my power, you said you'd do this. And of course, yeah, the circumstances we find ourselves in, no one could have predicted. So it's not necessarily the politicians' fault, because they are busking it as well. I mean, it's, yeah, you'd have to be a very enlightened being to make the right decisions all the time at this point in history, and history will judge them. And the people that are, feeling that way at the moment, I really don't blame you. Yeah, we all need to be thinking about the big questions, because everyone needs to be contributing towards their answers.
True.
And building a better world in the shell of the old. build the new world in the shell of the old.
I feel like it's sort of like how sorry, I'd frozen.
No, you haven't.
Yeah, no, you're back. You're fine. Don't worry.
I'm laughing. I feel it's up to us to each, become that change that we wish to see. And so much power and story and narrative around the institution that governs us as, sovereign beings. I think oftentimes one of the reasons why I stay outside of the political arena is because the more I read into policy, etc., diminishes my sense, if I allow it to, of that I am a sovereign being, and I am going along with these party lines that are dictated to me from others above, or in line, in step with. Somebody said to me recently that they long for just a wholly benevolent form of minimal government that just is about the bare bones, healthcare, education, the real bare bones of society, and really takes their foot off the accelerator towards any other sense of governance. And I'm more in alignment with that, I have to say. That
I get that.
Yeah.
Inner party politics, there should be no place for it when the world is in freaking crisis. We should be coming together, not spatting. But having said that, what I find quite interesting when we look at programming and how we're programmed to think particular things, and I think that there's a lot of unconscious bias around, best way to put it, classes who've been privately educated and had money behind them. We still have this sense of serfism, so the serfs and the lords. And for some unknown reason, the serfs seem to have this unconscious bias that the lords know what the hell they're doing. Maybe because they've had paid for education, maybe because they, come from a different particular class system, but we're still doing a little bit of that. So in Somerset, there's fox bands, and yet you still see hunters out there, and you will still see people opening the damn gates for them. And I'm thinking, what is this? And begging your pardon, my lord, begging your pardon. And so some of this is, I think that some of the reasons is we do have this unconscious bias around why political systems vote in particular ways. That just even my own schooling, I was talking to this for a couple of friends of mine who were privately educated, and they were told, because you went to Teddy's, all doors are open for you. The world is your oyster. You can have everything because of where you went to school. Whereas when I was at school, I was told you'd be lucky to get a job. So when I approach a job, I go to that job with this kind of, oh, please give me a chance. I'll prove to you that I can do this job. I can prove it. So my attitude when I'm negotiating money, when I'm negotiating employment, is always going to be from this place of gratitude and being subservient. Whereas if I'd have had a very different education and a different upbringing and a different set of programs, I'd be like, well, of course you're giving me the job. Do you know who my father is? So I think that we need to break down some of these structures and programmings, that when we think, why do I believe what I believe? And then this all comes back to your inner knowing. Like, why do I believe that these people are going to save us? Why do I believe that they know any better than me? And we do this as women as well, the unconscious bias where we believe that men know more than we do. I had this happen recently where a very good friend of mine, she had a problem with a piece of stereo equipment. And I said, I'm just getting a glass of wine. I'll come and fix that in a sec, because, I have past theatre stage management. I'm a huge tech. I understand sound, right? I know how to rig these things into large sound stadiums and all sorts. So, give that to me. I'll work it out. But she just kind of looked at me as if I hadn't spoken, and then asked a bloke. I've also had this happen trying to get a car out of mud, when I'm like, right, okay, I'm just going to go and get some sticks and a board or something like that to get under the tyre and blah, blah, blah. And whilst I'm getting the equipment that's needed, I get, oh, excuse me, sir, could you please help us with the car? We're stuck in the mud. I'm like, I'm doing it. Where does that come from? Why do we do this? So I think that the first thing about what is the new world that we're creating and how do we look at politics and how do we look at these things, is that we've got to stop thinking about, how this unconscious bias about that we all seem to have around kind of how we look at who needs to be in power and what we think of people, because we all suffer from unconscious bias to some degree. I really kind of catch myself on these things. Like, it might even be if someone's younger than me, I'll just assume they have less life experience. Who the hell am I to know? Who the heck do I know? So it's about being able to look at people really clearly and making sure that you don't put your own projections on things. And that way we might actually end up with a better infrastructure when it comes to governance that isn't based on party politics, that isn't based on a party line. Because certainly MPs, you kind of think your MP for your local area is going to vote in a way that works for your local area, no matter what that voting happens to be. But sometimes their hands are tied because they have to toe the party line, and if they don't toe the party line, they lose their seat. So this stuff should not be the case. It should be that the people that we vote into place for governance of our local area stand up for our local area, not for their own backs and keeping their own jobs in position, because it shouldn't be like that. There's a lot wrong with it.
Yeah, I might jump in there and say, as the queen of manifestation, when we look at the collective sort of thought process, the conscious that sort of says, well, they're going to screw us over, aren't they? Well, they will if you will them. There's just saying, ladies, just saying. So here, really valid question, which is, we've talked about stepping into your power and, maybe not giving it away or assuming that someone else has power over you. So the question from Helen here is, but what does that look like? Power, that is. And another one after that, which is on the same vein, from Kathy. I'd love to hear more about the role of ego as you step into power. I agree that's impossible to diminish it. So two there about power. How do you step into it? And what's the role of ego in that? There you go.
I'm busted to dive in as usual.
Go on, Becky.
Go on, Ashely, because there's something coming.
Oh, I'm writing it down. How to step into your power.
Is that the right? That was the first question, Heena. Can you repeat the first question?
So the first question was, we were talking about power earlier and about stepping into your power. So the question was, but what does that look like? Power, that is. What does that look like?
One word: self-esteem. Carry on, Ashely.
Self-esteem, happiness, joy. I think, you know, it reminds me of what I was saying before about being invulnerable. You know, and I'm not suggesting that I'm there all the time. I'm certainly not. But I know that when I am in my power, when I'm rooted in me, when I am high flying, and I exude joy and I exude happiness. And if somebody says something off the cuff, like as mentioned earlier, it doesn't touch me because I'm not feeling fragile. So it absolutely comes to your self-esteem. If I'm feeling like I have low self-esteem, then I'm more likely to tap into my shame and where I feel I'm not good enough. And when I'm dancing down those dilly-dally bloody lanes, I'm not in my power. And you know, it's a journey, isn't it? I'm on it, I'm off it. I'm on the ride, I'm off the ride. And I just keep trying to align with being on the ride more and more and more. And hopefully you've got some people around you that tell you and help you to appreciate or help you to hear how amazing you are. Don't do it on your own.
I'd probably also jump in there and talk about sort of your belief system and your self-beliefs. I mean, I'm a senior member of the IT community, and I didn't realise I was one of a handful of women globally in senior IT positions until somebody pointed it out to me. I didn't feel threatened by it until somebody pointed it out to me. I was too busy trying to do the best job I could. But suddenly, when somebody pointed out to me that I was a minority, I started to feel like the minority. I potentially probably started creating behaviour that felt a little victimised almost. And I think, speaking from self experience, it's you can sometimes let your belief system take over and take control of the power that you believe you don't have. But actually, if we were to start from a basis that says, I do have the power, just like you ladies are saying, I do have the power, I'm going to use it well, and I'm going to believe in myself. I found it worked. It absolutely does. There's one comment here that sort of said, I really want to share belief in yourself. If I believe I can do something, I can. And if I believe I can't, then I can't. It's about limiting belief systems, and that's from Anne. So I think there's a few shared thoughts out there on this as well.
Emma, do you want to say anything? Sorry, because otherwise I get excited.
I just agree with you, and just to sort of the lady wanted to talk about the ego, and that's very tangled up with self-esteem, and I just feel that to build this new future for everyone, we all have to do just a little bit of work on ourselves, unpicking. Sometimes it's hereditary, you know, this if you come from a long line of working class people like myself, I think it's actually, I see it in my cousins and everyone, we're a little bit, you know, intimidated by people who are of a perceived higher class, shall we say. And there's things like that you have to consciously unpick, because it's not going to come from anywhere else, and nobody's going to do that for you, and you have to do the work on yourself, otherwise this new society is just not going to happen. So it's actually an individual act as to improve the collective experience. That's what I'm getting from what everyone's saying, but I hope I've summarized that correctly.
Yeah, I think, you know, and also there's two types of your ego. There isn't just one egotistical ego. You know, your ego actually is a really useful part of who you are as a person, because it's your ego that's the driving force that wants to make you enlightened. It's the ego that's a driving force that makes you want to educate kindness. It's being mindful of the limiting beliefs that the ego wants to protect. you know, that keeps you limited, that stops you growing. It's being mindful about where you're coming from when you feel that you need to lower somebody else's self-esteem in order to give you the perception of raising your own. So really, I think rather than trying to get rid of your ego and think that that's going to get rid of all of your limiting beliefs, it just won't. That's not where they're living. They're not living there. So if you can embrace your self-esteem by using your ego to embrace your self-esteem, then it's going to do wonders for your soul. I don't believe in this idea that, you know, maybe this is because I'm an egotist, I'll own it. But, you know, I don't believe in this idea that you have to get rid of your ego in order to become a spiritual person. I think it's okay if you can live on the side of a mountain and have someone bring you food. That's great. You can just spend all of your time meditating. But for those of us who actually have to navigate this world, I think you have to navigate this world with the cleanest ego that you can possibly have, which means that you are your authentic self, you take responsibility for yourself, and you try and avoid victimhood as much as possible so that you can be the hero in your own story without having to go around telling everybody that you're a hero. It's about finding that place inside of yourself that is just authentically loving towards yourself and says, I have gifts, I want to give them to the world. And that's not there's a big difference between saying, the ego would say, I'm amazing and I'm better than everyone. I'm just incredible and I'm so much better than you and you and you and you. Whereas your higher consciousness ego, if there's a way of putting it, I'm not quite sure, would say, I'm really amazing. And I'm going to use that to serve you and you and you and you. And when you come from that place, that works. Go on, Emma, go.
Well, I'm totally hearing you. I just wanted to quickly interject with the quote I heard this week. Actually, it's like, in the past, in, you know, several generations back, for us all, it was the rule of might, and the strongest people prevailed. And then we got this sort of so-called civilization, and it's the rule of law. So the privileged people prevail, and the new society that we're birthing right now with all this pain is ruled by love, where everyone is uplifted. And that really resonated for me. So I just felt I have to kind of chuck that in. Anyway, back to you.
Actually answers the question. That's just the best way you could have answered that question. That's great.
There's a beautiful comment that resonates with that, which is from Tamsin here. She says, I also think that this pandemic has emphasised the need for greater personal responsibility. It's also exposed all the things that are no longer working and presenting us with all the opportunity to do something about it now, that it cannot be unseen. So
100%, exactly that.
I think that it's, you know, to be ruled by...
Sorry, to be ruled by a what?
To be ruled by love is such a beautiful way to put it, because
yes,
when does that come into the you know, political arena ever? And if we were ruled by love, and if politicians were ruled by love, then there wouldn't be people on the streets, there wouldn't be people going hungry, it would be a far greater and an amazing society and world that we lived in if we were all ruled by love.
And I think we've just seen an example of that with New Zealand. I mean, wow, like, talk about winning at life. And even the fact that Marianne Williamson stood in the States is just extraordinary, but the hell she went through. And that hell, as she's documented quite a lot, was by other women with their own level of, oh, well, if she's doing that, how can she do that? I'm going to pull her down because then that makes me feel better. It's like, rule by love. Let that be your guide. Let just make sure it is. Yeah, it's a good thing. Cool.
All this work with community, people are starting to do things that they know they can do to help. They're reaching out to their neighbours, to their friends, to society. That's going to be the stronger part, and there's a lot of love that comes from. So maybe that's where the power really is. If there's enough community sense, if there's enough growth in that space, then maybe the real power will prevail. And that really is the love that the community sectors are also coming together with, isn't it?
It is. Do you know, I think, unless anyone's got anything else that they want to add, I just think that that's a really beautiful place to end. So I don't know if you've seen any other comments, Heena, or anything. I just want to say,
we've had some fabulous comments. I will say thank you to everyone that's engaged. There's been a lot of comments where people have enjoyed and really sort of resonated with some of the comments that you've all made. We've had a really good, healthy group. So thank you to all of our viewers as well.
Yeah, thank you for tuning in. Really appreciate it. I mean, we're just having a go, we're just having a go. It just seems like the ideal time. I know that everybody's doing some live this and broadcasting that, and the fact that we're not all doing yoga for you and that you're copying us. I mean, we've got 2 yoga teachers. We should have added that in. But we just, but thank you so much for joining us, and continue to post your comments. We would love to read them. If you're looking at this after the live is finished, do add your comments. We will look back on those. I'm going to try and do some more live stuff with some interesting people. So we'll see where this kind of goes and where it ends up, or basically we won't see where it goes. We'll just keep on that journey and just see how lovely the view is, because I think that that's probably better than having some kind of crazy end destination in mind, like we think like we know what we're doing. I don't want to get away with that. And thank you so much to my lovely friends. I mean, actually, just thank you for putting up with me for the length of time that you have. It's funny, we have in this quadrant here, Ashely, who I met in London, Heena, who I met in Bristol, and the lovely Emma, who I met in Western-super-Mare, where I currently live. So it's kind of like the last few years. We just need someone from San Francisco on here, and we'll be all made up. That may come. I've got some good friends over there. So thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. I'm not going to tell you to say stay. What I'm going to tell you is stay fabulous, stay brilliant, stay just doing your thing, doing your do, rocking your inner journey and being the kind person that you are, and go out there and be fabulous in the world. Thank you so much. Mwah. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.